The NFL Draft, a period of iconic moments that you may remember, such as Edgerrin James or Myles Garrett going first overall, or moments you may not remember, such as Russell Wilson or Steve Smith in the third round. And that is the time where bad teams get their final great shot to rebuild their rosters into a Super Bowl contender. Because everyone loves a Cinderella story, right? Today, I'll be ranking the last 5 comeback teams based on 2 factors: the comeback season and long-term success. For a team like this year's Washington, I'm going to be mostly just going on based on last season and how I think they'll do in the future. Starting with number 5, the 2020 Cleveland Browns. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, Cleveland is clearly not scoring high in the longevity column. That's mostly thanks to this stupid trade, which hardly seems suitable for a guy who's been out of the game for a year. But we'll come back to that trade later. Coming off the 2019 season, Cleveland was in a rough spot. Not as rough as some of the other teams on this list, which is a factor in why they're at the bottom of it, but bad enough to hold the 10th pick with a 6-10 record. But in the 2020 season, Cleveland had a season of epic proportions. An 11-5 record which granted a wild card matchup with the dreaded Steelers. And the offense came through, jumping out to a 28-0 lead, and despite Pittsburgh's best efforts, the victory. Now, a loss to Mahomes and Henry's Chiefs occurred after that, but an overall successful season. Now, that season was great, and Browns fans had high hopes, expecting Baker to continue to dazzle and Kevin Stefanski to progress into one of the NFL's top head coaches. I guess that happened. Baker's injury in 2021 was a major factor that kept Cleveland out of the playoffs, but they still achieved an 8-9 record. Surely with the guy that won Cleveland its first playoff game in decades, they would make the playoffs next year stronger than ever. Or you could trade all your money and draft capital for a guy who is arguably the worst human in the NFL and hasn't played football in a year. And when the lack of playing time is the best issue, you've got a problem. Following an undeserved 11 game, it should have been more suspension, Deshaun Watson returned to the field and was booed by Browns fans and played about as badly as Kyle Allen did in that game. And so the beginning of Cleveland's Deshaun era left little hope for Browns fans. Till he got injured, Joe Flacco was resurrected, and they somehow made the playoffs before getting squashed by the Houston Texans, whom we'll get to later. So while Stefanski did get another Coach of the Year, the success Browns fans expected in 2020 didn't quite come to them. Especially since the following year, Baker had the best year of his career in Tampa, and Deshaun got injured again and might have kept him out until 2026. Or hopefully forever. Number 4, the Jacksonville Jaguars. When I looked at the 2022 NFL season, my first thought was, obviously, the Detroit Lions. They're a powerhouse today. Then I remembered the Giants, who made it to the divisional round, and I switched my guess to them. Then I remembered the Jacksonville Jaguars. Seriously, what was in the water in 2022? Detroit, yes, rose from the number 2 pick to barely miss out of the playoffs, but Jacksonville made it to the divisional round from the number 1 pick, easily the most notable Cinderella team at the time. Coming off of the 2021 season, where Trevor Lawrence, in fact, did not seem like the next GOAT, hopes were not very high, especially with Mac Jones coming off of Pro Bowl rookie year with New England. But when they finally got rid of the dumpster fire of an NFL coach named Urban Meyer and hired Doug Peterson, things changed drastically. Surprise number 1 pick Trayvon Walker didn't do much for Jacksonville in 2022 compared to Aiden Hutchinson and Sauce Gardner, but for some reason, the trio of Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, and Evan Engram dominated the AFC South, pushing their way to the top of the division after finishing dead last the previous year. And in the wild card, well, I won't lie, they got their faces stomped on and it was awesome to watch. Until Jacksonville and Joey Bosa ruined my night and they came back from 27-0. And so Jacksonville was poised to make the next step in 2023. The AFC South scrambled to find a quarterback that could rival Trevor Lawrence, and so they did, pretty well actually. Jacksonville blew an 8-1 start, which was aided by T-Law's injury, and the Jags missed the playoffs at 9-8, sitting 3rd in the division behind Houston and Indianapolis. But surely in 2024, things would change. Jacksonville drafted Brian Thomas Jr. to complement Christian Kirk, and Trevor had all those weapons he would need to push into the playoffs once again. And it did change. For the worse. While Brian Thomas had the best year from a rookie receiver in 2024, it didn't help the team win. Trevor was injured and Mac Jones started a large portion of the games. Coupled with poor coaching and one of the worst defenses in the NFL, a lack of stability keeps Jacksonville low on this list. But nobody can deny that incredible 2022 season. Number 3, the Houston Texans. I'm sure Texans fans were furious when Davis Mills made the 2-point conversion that lost them the number 1 pick and gave it to Chicago, who traded it to Carolina. But now in hindsight, it worked out pretty well. Houston revamped their team, bringing in solid weapons like Devin Singletary and Dalton Schultz, while upgrading their defense with guys like Sheldon Rankins, Denzel Perryman, and former 49ers safety Jimmy Ward, who followed now head coach DeMeco Ryans to Houston. And so draft day came, and the Texans front office came through, drafting C.J. Stroud at number 2 before making a blockbuster trade with Arizona, using one of Cleveland's picks from the Deshaun Watson trade, to draft defensive end Will Anderson. And so the season took off for Houston. C.J. Stroud had one of the best rookie seasons in NFL history, and Will Anderson made the Pro Bowl and won Defensive Rookie of the Year. 2024 comes around, and hopes remained high for the team, and unlike our past two teams, the Texans prevailed. Only bogged down by a struggling O-line, but bolstered by its defense, Houston maintained its status as a threat to all teams. In the wild card, they crushed the Chargers, forcing Justin Herbert to throw more picks in that game than in the rest of the season. Jeez, that hurts to say. In the wild card, they put up a good fight, but were put down by the Kansas City Chiefs. Houston has great potential to make it to its first Super Bowl. So why are they only at number 3 on this list? Because this is the number 2 spot. Number 2, the Washington Commanders. Again, another case of the number 2 pick outshining the number 1 pick. Dan Quinn's hiring in Washington left some scratching their heads, but he proved them wrong. Washington's season was sparked alive by Jane Daniels' legendary Hail Mary against Caleb Williams and Tyreek Stevenson's Bears. And he continued on a season that somehow topped C.J. Stroud's. Terry McLaurin finally having a competent quarterback sparked the best season of his career. The resurgence of Zach Ertz's career only added to the unstoppable Washington offense. The Commanders won their first playoff game in 20 years off a doink-in field goal against Tampa, and pulled off a dominating upset against Super Bowl favorite Lions, before Philadelphia quickly returned the favor. But it barely takes away anything from the historic season of the Commanders. Going forward, Washington's going to need to have a better defense to help prevent other players like Saquon from running them over, and a better O-line could really help Jane Daniels continue to progress. But still, turning around a 4-13 record into an NFC Championship appearance? What comeback season could top that? Number 1, the Cincinnati Bengals. You know what happens when you pair a quarterback with his number 1 target from college? Literal magic. Coming off a 4-11-1 2020 season where Joe Burrow's rookie season was cut short from an ACL tear, the Bengals were searching for anything that could give their offense some life. So instead of bolstering their O-line with Penei Sewell or Rashawn Slater, they went with the flashy pick in Jamar Chase. And it was not a bad flashy pick. Jamar Chase has had 1,000 yards every single year and hit 1,700 yards and 13 touchdowns in 2024. But in 2021, his impact was just as big. Burrow's resurging Bengals were propelled to a 10-7 record in a wild-card berth. While the O-line continued to struggle, like 9 sacks against Tennessee, they continued on their run, pushing past the Raiders, Titans before reaching Kansas City. Their second matchup that year, but the stakes were much higher. Yet Burrow and the Bengals pushed past Kansas City, now searching for their first Super Bowl title in history against the Rams. Now, we all know how that story went. They put up a fight, but the Rams' triple threat of OBJ, Cooper Kupp, and Matt Stafford, along with Eli Apple, led the Rams to win 23-20. But the Bengals were still out for revenge. They looked even better in 2022, going to a 12-4 record and making it all the way to the AFC Championship again, where they controversially lost on an intentional grounding and a late hit. So 2023 would be their year, certainly. Kansas City wasn't getting any better. They could obviously push their way to the Super Bowl if they wanted. Not with Jake Browning as their quarterback, though. While he did do pretty well, Joe Burrow's injury significantly tampered Cincinnati as they narrowly missed the playoffs at 9-8. But they still went 9-8 with Jake Browning. So certainly 2024, certainly they could win. Or not. Burrow was healthy. T. Higgins was healthy. Jamar Chase was healthy. But if they scored 35 points, the defense would let up 40. Despite historic seasons from Burrow and Chase, their defense cost the Bengals their playoff spot, and probably Burrow's MVP. But nonetheless, this team is still a contender for next year. And so I think we can all agree that comeback teams are great. They're intriguing. It's probably why we start rooting for them when they start to win. So with the 2025 draft coming up, pay attention to those top 10 picks, because one of those teams will probably be a Super Bowl contender by this time next year. Just not the Jets. They're a lost cause.